Welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here and we're going to continue our build on the beanery, so stay tuned. Well, thanks for coming back. We're getting real close to wrapping up this building. We'll see if we can get close enough to that by the end of this video to call it quits with this one. And head on to the next build. Like I said in the last video, we're probably going to go ahead and start on the freight station next, which was really a nice building, another brick structure. I'm going to proceed with some of the walls and stuff on it in a slightly different direction, but we'll get more into that as we start the build. So this video we're going to continue on with that third roof on that last hotel building and get some of it. We have some details to work on. We have those two extensions to get added on and the walkway finished. We're going to work some on that platform and see if we can mount this building on it together as one big structure. So let's just jump into this and see how far we can get in this video. The first thing I want to work on here is this little building that goes on top of this three-story hotel building, the last roof that we have to put together. You can see here it's just a small building and there's no windows. There's one door in the far side that gives you access to the roof, and it's not a flat roof. It has this raised roof on it. Now the door, I don't really have proper doors for this, so what I'm going to do is just use this Teachy door that I'm showing right here, but I'm going to doctor it up a little bit. I'm going to cut this window, or the window that's above the door, off of this, a skylight, and cut the header off of that, and then glue it back onto the door. So I just have a basic door with a window in it to use in that shed. They wouldn't have used something as ornamental as a skylight door in this upper building, even if it would have had a window. I don't have a picture of it, so I don't know. But once that's said and done, I come back and paint that so that I have a door to work with. And then I go ahead and cut the four sides for the building. I kind of guesstimated at this. I blew the picture up and took dimensions to some degree, and it's roughly about 10 feet wide, and it's just a few feet shorter on either end than the width of the building. So I just picked pieces that I thought would work to that degree. And with the door, I go ahead and cut the opening on the one end so that the door could set in there. And this can be a little rough because it's not like the brick. It actually has wood frame that oversets the outside, since this is a wood frame building. So it's easier to cut the doors on this. And I put these corner braces on there. And once I put the corner braces on, everything's glued and set up, then I come back and start gluing the four corners. Now I did use weights on these because it does have some of that warping that the walls on that other building had that I put together. But then once I get those two corners done, I glue them together in this one building. And then I come back and put the basic paint on all the wood siding, and then mount the door in there. I go ahead and put these extra braces where the building meets the roof of the other building, so it has a bigger gluing surface. And then I need to put a roof on this. So I'm coming back here and just measuring. It is just like a couple inches in HO scale wider at one end than the other end. I obviously made a slight typical blade width error on my cuts for this. So anyway, I always cut or measure twice and cut once. And once I get the measurements for the roof, I'm looking at this, and it has four flat sides that come up and meet a short ridge in the middle of the roof. So what I'm going to do is come in 4 feet from either end and put these ridge pieces in there that create the height in the roof that I need. And so I just went ahead and cut all these pieces for the basic center part of that roof that I'm going to build. And then what I do is, I sand down the edges and everything so I get nice square meets, and I come back and put the basic frame of that together. And this will just slide down in and glue inside the edges of that building in the center part, which you'll see here in a little bit. And then once I have that on, and I glue these two center pieces that support the ridge of the roof on the top of that. And then I give this a little bit of time to set up and get good and sturdy, and then I glue it down in the building and let that set up using the tester's glue, because it's plastic to wood here, and it gives just a better adhesion as far as I'm concerned. And then I come back and add the angle braces for the flat roofs that come up and meet that ridge on the ends. Now I think I am going to add a center brace in this end wall to give a little more support on an end piece, but the rest of the roof should have plenty of support for the roof. So the next thing we're going to do is just put plastic on. So I just turned these upside down on a sheet of that real thin plastic and marked the angles against the plastic so I knew I had the exact size, and then cut them off and put them on. And then did basically the same thing with these last two end pieces and just glued it all on, so then we have all the plastic on the roof. Now this had a paper roof on it, so I'm just using the same tissue paper like I've used for all the other paper roofs, and I kind of like the crinkly effect once it's on and glued. So I do the first two sides here and glue them down. Then once I have it glued down, then I use a knife in the edge of the plastics to cut it even with the plastic once it's glued down. Then I do the same thing with the two ends as well. I glue it on, then use a knife to trim off any excess that I have along the lower edge and the seams. And the flashing that I use, I just made a bunch of this years ago. I just took a big sheet of that tissue paper and spray painted it all black, and then just took a knife and pre-cut all these and threw them in a bag, and that's what I use. I just cut them down to size and glue them on to do the flashing in the joints of all the tissue paper. And then I come back and trim the lower edges with a knife, and then come back and paint everything. And the paint's still wet here, so it's a little shiny, but you know, now we have all the paper and the roof painted, and that's one more thing done on our list of things to do. So, you know, I came back and went ahead and used my felt tip marker and added these lines on the roof for you know, the seams that would have been in the paper that they put it down in rolls, because there wouldn't have been a big enough piece to use for the whole thing here. And you know, I need to put the trim on the building, so I'm going to pre-paint this long strip with the rattle can and come back and just add the trim to the building. Now what I did was go ahead and place the building on top of this because I wanted adhesion between the building and the plastics. I marked an outline of where the building was going to be, and then cut that part out, and then glued the paper down across the whole building. And then it gives me a spot to come back here. Now that the building is done, it's got all the trim on it, so we're just going to go ahead and place that on here, because I need to put flashing on this too, and around the edges of the wall too, and the chimneys have to go on here before we can paint the roof. So we're going to let all this set up and kind of cure a little bit and move on to something else while this is setting up, but that's one more thing done. Now we built the extension for the walkway for the other side, but this is the second one we need to build. So I just came back through and cut those same long I-beams from that old hand supports from the bridge we had before, and I glued these I-beams in between them. And now here's pictures of the angle, because I have to glue this angle on top of those I-beams for the wood to sit down in on top. And I'm going to leave this one I-beam out at the very end of that for when I put it into the building. And once all that's glued together, then we come back and glue it onto the upright support that'll hold it up in the air out at track side, and glue all that together. Now one thing I need to use, and I haven't shown this before, a lot of the angles that I cut using this. I know you've seen my clear plastic triangle, but this is really a handy tool to do a lot of angle work if you're doing angles. And I used it to cut these angles for the upright supports where these two pieces connect together to give more support underneath that walkway overhead. And then I go ahead and glue those in place. And I put all these plates on the outside of where all the braces and angles and everything were, and get this all ready to put paint on it. And then I'll just take it outside and put it on a board and use a rattle can to go ahead and get the whole thing painted, and then we have it to this point here. So, you know, it's basically ready to set in the building at this point if we wanted to. I've kind of decided to do some other things first. So here's the small rod that we're using for all the handrails. I showed this before. It's the same rod we used for the handrail for that staircase on the back of the building. So I come back here, and all the stanchions that come up from the angle iron that will hold on the handrails, I need to cut all these pieces for upright stanchions. So I cut all these, and then I come back and just scratch basically a little bit of paint off where each one of these go on that angle, and go ahead and glue all these supports in place that will hold the handrails on either side of the walkways. And then I come back with that same rod and glue the handrails on both sides. And I also made a handrail to go up the stairs on that side of the building with little tiny pieces that glue onto it. And then after it's taken outside and the rattle can used on it, then this is what we end up with here is something ready to connect into the building. So here's the first side that we had pre-glued in without the handrails on. I got to come back and add those, but since it's already in place, what I'm going to do now that this is glued in is go ahead and put all the wood in there. But before I do that, remember I left that one I-beam out that goes back in the very last end of that back there. So I come back in now that it's glued to the building, so I make sure I got a good tight fit and cut that and put it in place. And then I come back with all the boards and go ahead and add all the wood walkway on top of that, and that's one side of the wood walkway finished out to the end of the support, or at least as close as I'm going to go for right now. Now this isn't a good picture, but you can see I came back and added the staircase up along the side of the building and up to that I-beam now that this is all in place and ready to rock and roll. Now this was kind of showing in the other picture, but I took little tiny bits of that rod and glued hand supports that would hold it out from the building. Because although the staircase has a handrail on one side, which you can see here I added the rail to the top of, I also glued the handrail onto the building after it was pre-painted. And so we have handrails on both sides of the stairs, and went ahead and glued the stanchions on top of the extension on that side of the building as well. Also on this, you can see underneath the staircase here the little supports that I took off that landing from the stairs when I butchered it apart before, and I just took two of those upright stanchions from the landing and put an I-beam across the top of it and cut it to width so it would slide up underneath the staircase and give me some support in the middle of the staircase coming down, because it's too long of a span not to have something underneath of it to help support those stairs. Then I come back and I work with the handrails. I did the top rails here first and let those set up because I could just leave the building standing upright to do this and work on other things, and then laid it on each side to come back and put the middle handrail in both sides as well. And then other than paint, that's all the handrails done for this side of the building. And then I went back and once I had that extension glued the other end, I had the handrails on it previously, so I went back and added all the wood to the walkway platform on the other side and finished that project up as well. And the other thing we have left to work on here is the flat roof. Now before I can do a whole lot more with it, I had to come back and finish manufacturing these chimneys that I had started when I did the other chimneys for the rest of the building. So I finished all the painting on those and then glued them down to the top of the flat roof where they belong. And just try to get them upright. I noticed on some of the angle roofs I had, the chimneys are leaning just a little bit, but then I come back and I add the flashing around the building and the chimneys, and once the flashing's on, then I can come back and do painting. There's painting that needs to be done on everything. A lot of black paint needs to be done, so we'll do that. So then once we get the paint on the roof, it gets to this point where it's pretty much done. I may have to come back and touch up some areas once it's totally dry that you can still see some white through, but and then we get black paint on all the handrails on this end of the building and get all this end of the building completed as well with these walkway extensions. And once that's to that point, that's the basic building. We've got a lot of little stuff to come back and do, but I'm just going to give a basic pan shot here of the whole building as it stands right now. I'm still going to come back and mount this all on a platform And like I said, there's a few small things that we need to add to this building on top. This third story roof, I wish I'd have made it about 1.5 2 foot shorter in H.O. maybe. It looks a little tall to me, but you know, it's okay. I'm gonna live with it the way it is. And you know, it's a good looking building. It's a big building, like we've said many times, but you know, it's really satisfying to get the building to this point. Okay, so there you have that segment of Stu Structures. The beanery is just about completed. I did start cutting out a platform for it, so I think I'm going to do just one more video on this building and maybe start into the next building on the same video and just go ahead and mount it on a platform. And you know, there's a few little minor just things that I can add to it that just add a little bit interest here and there. There's a little trim. There's still tons of just, you know, a few hours of coming back and touching up just bits of paint here and there, adding some flat over areas where glue is, you know, shining and that type of thing too. And the lights, somebody asked me about the possibility of showing how I'm going to hook up all the lights. You know, I might go ahead and get the wires fished underneath the platform when I get it mounted on a platform, but I'm not sure I'm going to go ahead and hook them up at this point. I don't really have a power source. These really operate on very low voltage, and playing around with some of them in series and some of them in parallel and stuff, I can step that up just a little bit. But you know, I want to be really careful because these LEDs are so tiny, and I don't really want to, you know, burn them up when I plug them in wrong the first time. So in any case, we'll go ahead and fish the wires through the platform and get everything ready to wire up at a later date. And then later on, when I come back and play with that, maybe I'll do another video on it at that point in time. But we are going to proceed on with the freight house. So in the next video, we'll also go a little into what direction we're going to go to with the next building, and some of the things that are going to be required, and you know, some things to think about when you're starting a new building and what all you need, and how to prepare for building a new building, how to get the information and all that type of thing. Some of that I've went over before, and each building is unique in its own little way. This building we didn't have any blueprints for. I had a Sanborn map that I could blow up and get somewhat of a footprint for it, and by blowing up pictures and counting bricks and that type of thing, and door widths and heights, we could kind of get measurements to start putting this building together. The next one we do have some blueprints for it. And there again, it was an old building that changed over time, so we're going to look at the things we want to incorporate on that building as the way we're going to build it, because things did change, and see where we go from there. I've got to glue the flag back on this flag post of this too. I knocked it off for those of you that noticed it wasn't in the scan of the building here at the end of this video. You know, this stuff is very fragile, and it just doesn't take much to knock something loose if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. You're clumsy oaf, so to speak, like I am once in a while. But in any case, when you work in tight quarters, you know, you turn around, you're bumping something, and that's just the situation here, unfortunately. So hopefully one of these days I'll get into an area where I have a little more room to play with, and can set up a bigger shop and a nice work area. But for right now, you know, I'm just doing what I can with what I have, and that's what all of you out there should do. So like and subscribe to my videos. I appreciate you coming back and watching my videos with me. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell next to the subscribe button down there, and you'll be notified when the next video comes out. And you know, once in a while I do throw some odd things in there, and some of those hopefully are coming up before too long. Now that the weather's starting to warm up and get a little nicer, I can get out and do some photography and some things to put some other stuff together that I'm working on. But in any case, we've got another building coming up, so stay tuned to the channel for that, and happy model railroading.